Olá, seja bem-vindo, seja bem-vinda a mais um episódio do Jcast Preciso Saber, o podcast da Academia Judaica. Esse é um podcast para quem tem perguntas, porque sabemos que no judaísmo, mais importante do que termos as respostas certas é sabermos fazer as perguntas corretas. Eu sou Karina Calandrin, a host do podcast aqui da Academia, e neste episódio temos a honra de receber Eric Cohen, que é diretor executivo da Tikvah Foundation, um parceiro especial aqui da Academia, nosso parceiro desde o primeiro dia de fundação da Academia Judaica. E essa entrevista será conduzida por Mário Fleck, o nosso fundador e presidente da Academia Judaica. Essa entrevista será em inglês, então se você está nos ouvindo nas plataformas de podcast, nas plataformas de áudio e gostaria de ter a tradução em português, nos assista pelo YouTube, onde teremos legendas para toda a entrevista. Se você está tudo bem com o idioma inglês, continue aqui nos ouvindo pelas plataformas de áudio. Essa entrevista é muito interessante, pois tratará de temas como educação judaica, o comportamento das comunidades judaicas ao redor do mundo, especialmente nos Estados Unidos, mas também a importância hoje da educação para a comunidade e para a união da nossa comunidade em tempos difíceis como os que estamos vivendo. Espero que gostem. Acompanhem.
I have the privilege and honor today to interview in our podcast Eric Cohen. He's the executive director from Tikvah since 2007, and he's the publisher of Mosaic. Tikvah is a partner of the Academia Judaica since day one. We have been using many of the contents and projects and courses that are in the Tikvah platform in our own. And also Mosaic is a very important publication that we also do some translations of specific topics coming from Mosaic. So we are very happy and honored to have today with us Eric. Eric is one of the pillars of the world of Jewish education in the United States. And Tikvah has today many significant and impactful projects that we are learning from them, and we are trying to copy, replicate, and with the most of the content to offer to the Jewish community here in Brazil. So once again, Eric, thank you very much for joining us today. And I would like to start asking you to tell us a little bit more about Tikvah's mission today and the top priorities as an executive director that you give to Tikvah in the near future.
Well, Mario, it's great to be here, and it's really tremendous what you're doing to try to bring serious Jewish ideas, Jewish learning, Jewish education to your community, and we're really honored to be a partner with that. So look, I started at Tikvah in 2007, and when we began, there were really two clear ideas. The first is that ideas really matter, that Jewish civilization, Jewish history, Jewish philosophy, these books, this tradition, this Jewish way of thinking has something important to say to the world on the biggest human questions, from birth to death, love, freedom, justice, politics, that the Hebrew Bible is a fountain of wisdom, one of the foundational pillars of Western civilization, central to the American project. And what we wanted to do is to try to bring these ways of thinking to the world through books, through essays, through articles, through podcasts, through videos. And that if we could bring the greatest thinkers of the modern Jewish era to the largest possible market, we would do a great thing. The second pillar is education. And if you think about Jewish history, it's essential that you invest in great leaders. It's essential that you try to cultivate young people with the character, the ambition, the sense of fidelity to their own Jewish history and heritage, who want to stand forward in the civic arena. It's hard to think about the modern Jewish era without Herzl, without Soloveitchik, without Rabbi Schneerson, without these giant figures who have carried a lot of the weight of Jewish history on their shoulders, whether that's in politics or in building educational institutions or in preserving, the beauty and wonder of Jewish texts and literature and culture, and carrying that forward. And so that those people don't emerge from nowhere. They emerge because you invest in exposing them as youngsters to carefully reading great Jewish books, carefully reading great Western books, meeting models of excellence in different fields of life that they can learn from. And so that's what we've tried to do. It all comes down to those two simple purposes: ideas and education, all animated by the belief that Jewish civilization really matters, that the Jewish people are exceptional, and that our generation has a great responsibility to carry that forward.
Yes, Eric, I have a feeling that the war in Gaza was a turning point as regards to the attention of the Jews to the importance of Jewish education and learning and things like that. It's like that the Gaza war, in my opinion, triggered a very important turning point for the Jewish people, because we were very, we call this, people call it the end of the Jewish holiday, because we are a couple of generations that had a much better life as compared to 100 generations before. And maybe this was a wake-up call, as we feel here, that lots of the Jews became more interested, finally, in learning more about their heritage and the concept that they are part of a bigger history. Do you have the same sense in the United States? How do you view the impact of the current times in the opportunity to raise more the interest of the Jews in learning about themselves?
Yeah, I think there has been a great awakening among many American Jews since the horrible attacks on October 7th. And I think it's worth taking a minute and understanding what is this assault on the Jews that we're seeing in Western countries all about, and then what kind of awakening has it provoked? If you follow what's happened, for instance, on the American college campuses, what you have is a really radical left and radical Islamists who have come together attacking the Jews. And what that attack is it's an attack on Western and American civilization itself, using the Jews as their instrument. So, America is very much a Hebraic biblical nation. The Hebrew Bible was central to the American founding, central to our culture. Well, the Jews are the carrier of that tradition. We're attacking them. American Jews have really succeeded in America, in a meritocratic free society where hard work and initiative and entrepreneurship are rewarded. Well, these forces are attacking the Jews for their success in America. And of course, Israel is this heroic nation that is preserving its people, its land, its way of life, reborn miraculously, and surrounded by many enemies that want to see its destruction. And Israel has done what it's had to do to defend its own sovereignty. And these are people that don't believe in nations at all, and now see Israel and the Jews as the oppressor class against the oppressed. And so you have this kind of radical alliance of kind of Marxist thinking and Islamist thinking that's come together to attack the Jews, but they're really using the Jews as a tool to attack the West itself. And that, to me, means that Jews have to be leaders in defending America and defending a Western civilization. And I think what's happened is there are a lot of Jews who are living comfortable lives in America, taking advantage of the blessings of American liberty, who had weak or non-existent Jewish educations growing up, and who now have been awakened to care about their own history and heritage, who now realize that, if we're being targeted and hated, maybe it's because there's something exceptional and important about this. And that, I'm a Jew, not because they hate us. They hate us because I'm a Jew. And therefore, that means being a Jew has to really be something elevated and serious and majestic and exceptional. And that then means you got to have real learning. because the only deep ground for Jewish identity is a real knowledge of Jewish history. The only way to make courageous Jews who can stand up against the tide of anti-Semitism are to have Jews that stand on the shoulders of Israelite giants and understand their heritage. And so that's what Tikvah is all about, meaning trying to give young Jews that deep grounding in Jewish history and tradition and thought so they can be leaders of the West and can stand, by the way, side by side with our Christian friends and allies to defend Judeo-Christian values against those who seek to destroy them. And that's the civilizational struggle that we're now in.
And Eric, in that sense, do you see, can give us more color on how do you set up your strategies? I know that at Tikvah we have a very good connections with a couple of universities in the United States. Some university campus in the last few times, they have been much toxic for Jews, and a couple of others are much more friendly. Give us more color about the strategies of Tikvah with students at the universities in the United States.
Well, look, what I'd say first is the most important thing is Jewish day school education and trying to get as many Jewish students as possible into full-time Jewish schools. Right now, a fairly low percentage of American Jews are going to Jewish day school. We want to see that expanded as much as possible, and to try to encourage Jewish families to choose full-time Jewish education for their kids. It also matters a lot, though, what happens inside those Jewish schools, meaning you have to make sure that they're teaching Jewish tradition in an elevated way. You have to make sure they're teaching Jewish history in a serious way. You have to make sure they're teaching the role of Jewish ideas and shaping the American story in a serious way. And so we're trying to create this renaissance of what we call Jewish classical education that will elevate what is going on in Jewish day schools, because we think this is a moment where that sector of American Jewish education can really expand. So we're working on training teachers, developing curriculum, creating honors programs within day schools, doing everything we can to try to strengthen Jewish K-12 in America. The second big front really are the universities. And what we've seen in America is many of the so-called most elite places, Harvard and Columbia, they've really shown that they have a very different view of the world, one that is not celebrating America, that is not celebrating the Judeo-Christian heritage. It doesn't mean there isn't a good professor here and a good professor there, but if you saw how the universities handled what happened after October 7th and allowing just a riotous assault on both Jewish students and Jewish ideas, those are universities showing who they are. That was the curtains opening up on the corruption of the humanities in many American universities that's been going on for decades. And so what we want to do are help build alternative citadels of excellence in major universities around the country. And the most exciting development is that in a lot of the bigger, and I'd say more conservative, more traditional states like Florida and Texas, those are major important universities, and they're now creating these new centers on Western civilization, and we're helping them create Jewish thought programs within those centers, and then helping to market those programs to the top Jewish students around the country in America. And what you're seeing is gigantic growth trajectories in the interest in Jewish students in going to these alternative centers of academic excellence. So, it all comes down to trying to invest in alternative educational institutions, to arm them with great teachers, great curriculum, great ideas, and then to make them so attractive to families and to the best students that you have a kind of renaissance of Jewish learning in America. That's what we're trying to help create.
And Eric, as you said, these institutions, they need to have significant number of very good quality teachers. And this is a challenge all over the world. I saw this in the United States as in our last advisory council meeting as well, but we have it here. What's your vision or strategy, as you said, to inspire young people to aspire to have this career track, to pursue to be interested in pursuing a career in Jewish education? What's the roadmap?
Yeah, look, teaching is a heroic, noble profession, and it is the indispensable profession if you want to preserve Jewish civilization. Meaning, Jewish teachers are the carriers of our culture. And so we have to make that field noble, exceptional, elevated, attractive to talented people. So we're trying to attack this in a lot of different ways. One is by working with some of the young people that are going through our high school and college programs. And we have, many, many hundreds of students going through those programs and giving them teaching opportunities where we can help train them and then place them in Jewish schools around the country. So we want to get students, even if they say, look, I'm going to only do it for 3 years, but I'm going to explore that profession. We want to make that very attractive by making the subjects really interesting, by getting the mentors, by helping place them in schools. So that's one track. I think second is trying to get people that are mid-career who have been in journalism or they've been in law, they've been in other fields, to say, you know what, I think I'd like to make a change. I want to contribute to the Jewish community, and we want to have programs that train them for teaching at a high level. Then you've got teachers that are already in the field, but that aren't in Jewish schools. And we want to try to help facilitate them moving into Jewish education. You've got teachers that are already in the Jewish education field. We want to help train and make them better. How do they teach Tanakh better? How do they teach Zionism better? How do they teach Jewish history better? You want to arm them with the best sheet music so that they can help play the music of Jewish learning at the highest level. So we're trying to attack it at all fronts, but it all comes down to one simple premise. The future of Jewish civilization depends on Jewish teachers. And I think our community is not invested enough in that field. And tragically, the field of education in America, and I'm sure in lots of parts of the world, has really gone in a bad direction. And if you look at the teachers' colleges that are training teachers, they are seedbeds of bad ideas. Bad ideas about teaching phonics and reading, bad ideas about culture and identity, bad ideas about America and the West. It's those places are very broken. And so we think we've got to create alternative strategies to attract and educate teachers who want to go into this field, and to attract philanthropists who want to help the Jewish community recognize that is the highest leverage investment. The highest leverage investment is educating young people. I don't think we need 100 more conferences on how to fight anti-Semitism. The only enduring answer to anti-Semitism is to train educated young Jews who know their history. And the only way you do that is through education. And so we need to go on offense through learning rather than on defense, through advocacy. That's our strategy.
Yeah, this is exactly the same vision that we have here in Academia Judaica, because we feel that we need to look at a long-term view, have a long-term view, and we are offering the Jewish school system here in Brazil the opportunity to train the teachers they have today, but also we are looking to partner with universities here that would combine with the Academia Judaica to develop, to educate the future workforce of teachers for the Jewish school system. Now, Eric, I also saw you mentioning a few times the vision of the educated Jew. In your opinion, what's the modern definition of the educated Jew?
I think you got to go back first to the fundamentals. I think the educated Jew studies Hebrew, right? Because Hebrew is the gateway to the Hebrew Bible. Hebrew is the gateway to modern Israel. Hebrew is the carrier of Jewish culture and civilization. And by the way, I say this as someone who didn't have a good Jewish education growing up, who has tried to give that to my own children, but who went to part-time Hebrew schools that didn't put enough emphasis on mastery and serious learning. So I think mission one is you got to put Hebrew at the center of Jewish education. I think mission two is you got to teach the Hebrew Bible. Jews should know the Bible. They should know the foundational stories and texts and ideas of our people. That is the primordial fount of Jewish wisdom. That is the narrative beginnings of our civilization. That is the guidebook of the Jewish way of life as a way of living. And I would also say it's the foundation of Zionism. Meaning Zionism was not invented by Herzl in the 1800s. Zionism was initiated, by the divine summons to the Israelites in the Hebrew Bible. And so you got to teach the Bible at a high level. I'd say third is, I think it's very important that Jews understand the central place of Judaism in Western civilization, right? That we're not simply a people apart trying to preserve our way of life against the pressures of modernity. There's some truth to that, but we're also a light unto the nations that is trying to bring our vision to the world. And that has happened in all kinds of complicated ways through Western civilization. And so if you think of Jerusalem as the moral capital of the West, that orients you to thinking about the significance of your calling as a Jew. That I, as a Jew, have an important role to play in the world. And by preserving the Jewish way of life, I'm keeping the lights on. The civilizational lighthouse is still on for the Western world. And here in America, I think that has to take on a uniquely American spirit, because I think America is got to be the leader of Western civilization. And I think America, from its beginnings, was a kind of Hebraic nation. I was actually just this week at Newport. So Newport, Rhode Island is where George Washington was one of the early founding groups of Jews in America were in Newport. And the oldest synagogue in America is in Newport, Rhode Island, called Touro Synagogue. And Washington wrote a very famous letter, George Washington, to the Jews of Newport on the meaning of America and on the role of religious freedom and religious liberty in America, and the inspiration that he took from the Hebrew Bible in understanding the meaning of the American story. He wrote a second letter at the same time to the Jews of Savannah, where he talks about America as the next promised land, and how he wants that his image of America as a kind of city on a hill is very much inspired by the place of the Israelites in history. And so I think the educated Jew has to understand that. Obviously, a great Jewish school has got to teach math at a high level and science at a high level, and prepare Jews for the realities of modernity. But the indispensable foundations of a Jewish education, I believe, are Hebrew, Tanakh, and an understanding how Judaism fits into the Western world. Now, obviously, I would add to that, Judaism is a way of life. That way of life has been transmitted through the rabbinic tradition. And I think it's essential that Jews understand how Jewish law works, the sacred Jewish calendar and its meaning. What Jewish ritual and Jewish time are sort of the physical manifestations and structures of Jewish wisdom. And so you have to teach young people. You have to habituate them, because this isn't only an intellectual enterprise. It's also a spiritual enterprise. It involves song, it involves memorization, it involves ritual acts. I think that's also central to Jewish formation. And I think, we live in modern liberty. Different Jews are going to make decisions about how they're going to live their lives. But the truth is, if you don't give young Jews a grounding in traditional Judaism, you're limiting their choices. You're not expanding their choices. And so I think the tragedy of modern Jewish life has been, in the name of freedom, we've not given our young Jews any education. And what we've ended up doing is limiting their freedom. We have it exactly backwards. A grounding in tradition gives young Jews the greatest scope of making sense of their lives. In the end, I believe, if you're grounded in Jewish tradition, you'll feel the call of Jewish tradition and want to live a traditional Jewish life as the truest and most elevated way to live. But if you're deprived of that, in a way, a choice has been made for you. It's a lot harder to learn Hebrew and reconnect with those texts when you're 45 than when you're 5. Just a much harder path, not impossible, but a much harder path. So I think we owe it to our kids to give them those foundations. That's where I think we can get to what an educated Jew looks like.
Yeah, fantastic. And we couldn't agree more, Eric, and we're trying to do that on our corner of the world here. And we see lots of young Jews that come, for example, from birthright, from Israel. Even though they are already 18, 20, 22 years old, they're trying to recover the time lost because they didn't have an opportunity to follow Jewish education. And we're trying to offer an opportunity to catch up. Just to conclude our conversation, Eric, usually we also talk about books. I think books play a very important role in the whole context of Jewish education. And my curiosity is, what is the book, besides the Bible, of course, that impacted you the most? And what are you reading now? And what would be a couple of suggestions for our audience in terms of important books to read?
Well, I have many books behind me here. I'm happy to, recommend a few. I'll just mention a few thinkers. So one of my most important teachers is a man named Leon Kass, who is a bioethicist and a philosopher, and then a real commentator on the Bible. And he's written some remarkable books on the book of Genesis, on Exodus. He wrote a beautiful short book with his granddaughter on the book of Ruth. And I think he really opens up the biblical way of understanding human nature and the human condition in a very rich way. That had a big impact on me. I think the works of Rav Soloveitchik, I think are very, very fruitful. We have a famous short book called The Lonely Man of Faith, which I think is a very deep account of the Jewish understanding of what it means to be human, what it means to be a Jew, what it means to live in search of God. And so I think that's a very sort of moving and interesting book. And lately I've been reading a lot about the influence of the Bible on America, because I feel a very deep sense of purpose that the Jews have to help renew the American experiment. I think America matters a lot for the fate of the world and the West. It matters in politics, it matters in war and peace, it matters in shaping the culture. And I think there's a real cultural struggle going on in America right now about who are we as a people. And I think the strength of America will be the extent to which we can go back to our Hebraic origins and recover that part of our identity as a nation. And I think the Jews can play a central role in helping to tell that story. And it's a story that has been too often ignored or belittled, which is a real assault on history, because it's just not true. Meaning the most cited text of the founding generation was not John Locke, it was Deuteronomy. And most Americans don't understand that. And so we're living in an age of near total ignorance about the Bible. And that means we're living in an age of widespread ignorance about America. And so I'm trying to really understand that history so that we can try to advance that case in the American public square, and to do it proudly as Jews, proudly as committed Jews who care about our country. So those are some of the things that I think are worth reading, or that I'm reading right now.
Very well, Eric. Thank you very, very much. It was a very important learning experience for us in talking to you. We are great fans and admirers of your job and the progress and the impact of Tikvah in the Jewish community, and we try to follow that as a role model, as an example for us. So thank you very much for your time again, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Mario, thanks for all you're doing, and happy to be in conversation with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Espero que tenha gostado desta entrevista. Se você está nos ouvindo nas plataformas de áudio como Spotify, nos dê 5 estrelas e também deixe comentários aqui na aba de comentários. Você pode deixar uma sugestão, uma crítica e até mesmo sugerir um tema que você queira ouvir nos próximos episódios, uma pessoa que você queira ver por aqui sendo entrevistada. Não deixe de colaborar com o podcast Aqui Preciso Saber. Se você está nos acompanhando pelo YouTube, também deixe aqui um like, se inscreva no canal da Academia Judaica e também comente. Deixe a sua sugestão aqui, que engrandece muito o nosso trabalho, e a sua sugestão é sempre bem-vinda. Até uma próxima!